It's all right. I've got it. Okay. All right. We'll kick off because there's a bit to go through. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for dialing in today. Samantha and I are very much looking forward to talking to you and with you about these two topics, psychological safety and neuroinclusion. I want to kick off with just a little bit of an admin first. So all sessions will be neuroinclusive. So this is the first of 4. About a week or 2 ago, I had an idea that we needed to talk a lot more about psychological safety, especially with the new laws in Australia. And the first person I contacted was Samantha and said, "Do you want to join me on the first session?" And she went, so that is why we are here. So we are both very, very passionate about the topic, about neuroinclusion and psychological safety. We are not legal experts, so that's the first caveat and a bit of admin. I've thoroughly researched the topic. I've looked at all available materials. I've done a short course, etc. So I'm across the theory and how it's being run, and I've looked at some of the research. But of course, when it comes down to these regulatory issues, always turn to your risk and legal people. So just making sure that that is clear from the start. We will, of course, answer as many questions as we can, though. So you can have your cameras on or off. It's completely up to you. Engage in a way comfortable for you. I will never call you out or put you on the spot. So you can raise your virtual hand or put a question in the chat. Samantha and I will be monitoring it continuously. I think there's an option to turn on closed captions for those who need it. I think if you go down to more, etc. I haven't checked that out. Someone only told me this just recently, and I must admit I haven't checked it out yet. I will be recording the session, but I will not be sharing the video. It's more for my own learnings and Samantha's learnings, and the audio, so I can make sure we've captured all the questions and the comments and anything else that has come through. So while it is being recorded, the video will not be shared beyond myself and Samantha. Okay, so and FYI for those of you in Australia, it is Inclusion at Work Week this week, from the 17th to 21st, managed and or launched by the Disability Council of Australia. Samantha, this is more your area than mine, so please just kind of chime in if you know more than I do. So it's a perfect week for it. So I'm just going to quickly start with introducing myself and then pass over to Samantha, and then we're going to go through the session. So we want this to be a discussion because we are talking about regulatory change. It does have to be, of course, we want to make sure that we set the scene correctly and we pass on information correctly. So first of all, my name is Amanda. I'm the founder and lead consultant of Thriving with Neurodiversity, and I'm an accredited ADHD coach. I have 20 plus years in communications, facilitation, and change management, which is very, very useful when I'm running my sessions. And I also have a graduate certificate in positive psychology from Melbourne Uni. I was diagnosed with ADHD about 8 years ago, and I have 2 neurodiverse teenagers. So we are a very mixed neurotype family, very, very busy, loud household, as you might imagine. So now I want to welcome my awesome guest and companion, Samantha, to introduce herself.
Similar to Amanda, I am also neurodivergent, diagnosed 7 years ago, following my children's diagnosis very young as neurodivergent. I worked in corporate HR and recruitment for 20 years before doing my master's in coaching psychology at University of Sydney. I've then worked in disability inclusion for Australian Disability Network, and also in careers education for University of Sydney. And then ultimately made the decision about 3 years ago to splice all of those things together to focus on furthering the employment and I guess thriving of neurodivergent people in the workforce globally. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me, Ben. And Amanda and I kind of came across each other doing similar work, and forged a friendship over that. So yeah, it's great to be able to work together.
So, okay, so I'm going to, I'm managing my technology as we go. So I have a very quick poll. Now, Samantha, you need to tell me whether it's visible or not. Just want to get a quick sense of where the level of knowledge people have and awareness of these two topics before I kind of launch into a bit of a spiel on both. So
It is visible.
Awesome.
Just...
Wonderful. Now, for those of you not from Australia, please still answer these questions, because the first question especially, because it'd be very interesting to see. And I'll get into the Australian side in a moment. Now, the reason we are focusing on psychological safety is that the laws in Australia have been changing over the last 2 years. So while there might be an Australian lens on this, there's still some very relevant information for everybody who's joined us. All right, the current place, no, it's planned, not sure. All right, I'll just let that, okay, so 50% no, interesting. Okay, and if you can you see question 2 as well? If you can answer question 2. Sorry, just so an FYI, I've got my fidget toy here, so that's every now and then you'll see this green ball in my hand. All right, I'll let you guys continue answering that, but I do want to get moving with the presentation. Okay. Samantha and I are very strong believers that psychological safety and neuroinclusion helps turn compliance into an organisational strength. Now, over the next half hour or so, we are hoping we'll share enough information with you to be able to bring you on board with that same thought. But this is one of the key reasons we're here today. Zoom, PowerPoint. Oh, I am not sharing. I'm not sharing, am I, Sam?
You're not. No, I was in my head then. I was like, would you like me to share? Can I share? Let me see.
I think you can. That would be lovely. This is what happens when I try to manage technology and talk at the same time. Oh, legend.
No problemo.
Okay.
Hang on
So
a
if you just
second.
want to skip to slide 3, what's changing?
Ta-da.
All right, can you, yeah, perfect. Okay, so, okay, so to kick off the session, we do need to start with some of the key definitions so we make sure that everybody's on the same page. So this is a very simple and useful graphic provided by WorkSafe Vic. If you are in Victoria, they have an amazing amount of information, and actually any state in Australia, you just have to go to WorkSafe, your state or territory, and they've got templates for everything. Very, very useful. So Victoria's new psychological safety regulations kick in on the 1st of December this year, bringing Victoria in line with the rest of Australia. So this means that mental health in the workplace must be treated with the same rigour and I guess intensity, not the right word, as physical safety. And it is now it's now turned into a compliance issue. So psychological safety in the workplace is now law and a compliance issue, I guess, which is something I want to talk about a bit later on. If you work for a company that operates in multiple states in Victoria, the recommendation is that you follow I guess they're called the best guidelines and the most rigorous, which is Victoria. And then you have little caveats for your own states, because there is a lot of similarity across Australia, but there is some little differences by state. Some other key points are to make the introduction of these new psychological safety regulations a bit easier, they have been aligned with the current work health and safety physical regulations. So workers must be consulted. So when you're identifying physical hazards or psychosocial hazards, workers must be collaborated with, they must help assess the risk, they must help mitigate the risk. There's controls, which are the risk mitigations, if you want to use some of the language, must be reasonably practical. Now, practicable. One of those legal terms, So basically it means for a senior leader that a passive or reactive approach is insufficient. So if somebody is suffering from a psychological, psychosocial hazard and it's not on your list, that is not enough. You must have as many proactive responses and hazards on your list, which is why the neuroinclusive lens is so important. I'll get more into the duty holder part of it as well soon. Both physical and psychological, you must consider the interaction and overlay. So if someone, for example, in the workplace is suffering from some bullying, they might also have some sensory issues with the lights. They might also have some issues with their manager and their job control, etc. So all of these things combine, as with all risks, to make them either high or low. At this stage, how's the pace? Am I talking too fast? Oh, good. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, so the key difference is psychosocial risks arise from work design and social dynamics, whereas physical risks are tangible from equipment or substances or trip hazards, etc. So the key thing around psychosocial design is that all leaders and employees must create or design work that does not impact mental health of their employees. This is a massive change, right? It's been mentioned in a lot of areas and stuff, but if done correctly, this has quite, and if the government can regulate it and if people do the right thing, this is a massive positive change and boost for inclusiveness in workplaces. But as most people I've spoken to have said, let's see what happens. So that's why we're doing this, because we don't want to.
Well, we're going to talk about the danger of that in a minute, aren't we? So,
yes.
Yeah.
All right, we could go to the next slide, thanks.
Yep, no worries.
Okay, so there's many different, there's many slightly tweaked definitions of psychological safety. The one that we kind of gone with is kind of this one. So it's the absence of personal fear. So it means you can turn up to work and not worry that there might be some microaggressions about your accent or what you're wearing, or you don't have to worry about the fact that you're in a really noisy workplace. Your desk is right on the aisle next to the kitchen. So you can turn up to work free of all that fear and anxiety and stress. And you can also speak up, offer feedback, share ideas, and be yourself without fear of ridicule, punishment, retribution, etc. So a quick way to check the status of psychological safety in your workplace is just ask yourself a few of these questions, right? So if you're in a team meeting, did the usual one or two people dominate the conversation? When a meeting is running out of time, who gets cut from the agenda first? If something fails, is there an opportunity to discuss, learn from it and try again? Or are people too busy trying to blame someone? Do you still follow I used to love this, follow the traditional way of seat allocation? So for example, if it's open plan, the most senior person gets the seat nearer the window, away from the aisle, and then you kind of move along with the most junior person on the aisle near the kitchen. So it's little things like that that can build up and people just need to be aware of. Now, the information on WorkSafe Victoria and all the WorkSafe sites, they've gone, it's absolutely amazing. They've given a list of possible physical, psychosocial hazards to help you start the conversations and to help you think outside of different areas. So there's a lot of great information there. So every employee can be impacted by psychosocial hazards. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that word. I'm just going to go hazards. These include younger neuro employees, migrant groups, and neurodiverse employees. Neurodiverse employees whose brains, like mine and Samantha's, operate slightly differently to the standard model, which is 80% of the population. I'll get into that in just a second. So neurodiverse employees, we're going to go look into some numbers first. Actually, I'll stop. I'll pause. Do you want to go to the next slide before I keep talking? Yep. Okay.
Sorry. Spoiler alert.
No, that's all right. It can all come up. Now, Samantha and
I've
I
ruined
can
everything.
both
Yeah.
talk about neuroinclusion and provide information, and we both run training workshops, etc. But because of the time and everything we're trying to do, we have one slide. So this is just to give you the context of why this is such an important group to focus on. 1 in 5 people are considered neurodivergent, which means by neurodivergent, we mean a person has been or could be diagnosed with neurological conditions such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, etc. And these are the numbers, just to give you a sense of actually how broad a group it is. Quick throw of an emoji into the chat, any emoji you like, if you have a family member, friend, or work colleague who you know is neurodivergent. You could just... Good question, Mel. I do have the stats on the 1 and 5, etc. And one thing I didn't mention is that after this session, we'll share a 1-pager of the key terms and the key points that we've covered with some of the definitions. And we'll also have links to where all the resources and the research that we've used. So we'll include that. All right, Samantha, how many do we have?
Oh, lots and lots. So we have, sorry, actually, I've got to scroll up to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. I would put lots and lots of emojis in there for myself as well.
Yeah.
Everybody I know. Yeah.
Yeah. You did well. You're
4,
fine.
5, there you go.
know.
Yeah, lots and lots of people.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All 4 members of my household. Oh, wow.
Excellent.
Okay,
Love
play.
it.
Yes, I feel and hear you. Yes. Oh, I'm just going to let someone in. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I've got to keep moving because with my ADHD, and I'll be very honest, I'm very passionate about this topic, and I'm trying very, very hard to stay on track because of the time that we have. So I have timers and scripts and everything to keep me moving, and I've already gotten off 3 times. So back to, right, next slide, please, Samantha. Okay, so we talked about the definition of psychological safety. Now, this is the definition of neuroinclusion. So it's a focus on the fact that even though a lot of these conditions have the words disorder and deficit in it, it's flipping that medical negative narrative and trying to focus more on the strength side and actually inclusion rather than focusing on differences and deficits and stuff. Nothing wrong with being different. We are all different. And if I could, we'd go into more detail about this, but keeping it high level. So it's difference, not deficit, and it's designing works so everybody, including people with ADHD, autism, etc., all neurotypes can thrive in the workplace, not just cope. So that is what neuroinclusion is about. And this is the key link into psychological safety. So the simple link actually is the stuff that makes work hard for neurodivergent people. So patchy support, poor feedback, noisy or hot spaces, microaggressions, lack of flexibility are the same hazards employees are expected to spot and proactively fix. So if you reduce the hazards, then inclusion will improve. If you build inclusion first, then the hazards drop. So there's a real strong relationship between the two to make both successful. And if you add a neuroinclusive lens, then you will spot more hazards proactively. So you'll actually be following the law in a better way. All right, next slide. Give me 1 second. I'm just moving my notes around a little bit so I can stay on track. Okay, so this is the busiest slide, which isn't very inclusive. So apologies for this, but it's important context. So, okay, so the whole why now, the why now bit has come from a few different areas. Because psychological safety or mental health in the workplace and stress and anxiety and time off work for these issues has been known for a very, very long time. In December 2018, the federal government wanted to make sure that all the work health and safety protocols that have been put in place, which focused on physical health, were working. So they did all of that, and that's initially where they noticed at least 34 gaps that could be covered by psychological safety. There was a big gap in the mental health area. So, and some research in 21, 22, which actually, Samantha, I'm going to pass over to you if you want to throw any more stats in there, but
Oh, yes, for sure. So, I mean, there's so many different stats that we could talk about in terms of kind of mental health and neurodivergence. But essentially, as an example, I mean, this is a little bit later on than 2022, but in last year, there was research done that shows that in any 1 year, 50% of neurodivergent professionals say that they've had to take time off work due to mental health caused by the workplace. So that's a huge number of people, citing a correlation between mental health and work. So, that's a huge statistic in terms of, and yes, in terms of the mental health of neurodivergent people more generally. We know that neurodivergent people have that comorbidity of anxiety and depression at much, much higher rates than people who are not neurodivergent, for lots of reasons. There's a lot of negative messaging that we grow up with that impacts things. And then, discrimination is real. We do face a lot of discrimination out and about in the world, and that has its impact. So, oodles and oodles of stats that tell us that neurodivergent people are a particularly high risk group when it comes to psychosocial, that our favourite word today, psychosocial safety. So happy to share any of those statistics with people as well.
Yeah, we'll include as much as we can in the one page that we leave you with, because ideally we want you to take what you've learned today into one page and go back to your colleagues and whatever else and go, did you know? So we want to make sure that you've got kind of a bit of stuff there. I'm just going to pause for a second. Are there any questions or anything specific people want to know? Please remember just to throw it into the chat. We want to make sure that, there's the opportunity. You're kind of giving up your lunchtime or having lunch with us. So we want to make sure that we, offer you as much as we can in these sessions. Okay, so very briefly, from 2023 until now, all states and territories within Australia have implemented the new psychological safety regulations. Majority of states have gone with Safe Work Australia and the the work. God, all these acronyms, all this government stuff, all the official government documents, right? That's what they're aligning to. Victoria took its time because it wanted to do things a little bit differently, of course, because there always has to be somebody who wants to do something differently.
Too busy drinking your fancy coffee. That's probably what it was.
Yeah. Too much fancy coffee drinking. So here we go. Okay, so all jurisdictions align to the work health and safety regulations and code by Safe Work Australia, which defines clear minimums for how organisations must identify, etc., control stuff. Victoria has some detailed bespoke regulations, making it the most stringent laws across Australia, which is why if you have a company based in numerous states, the guidance is you must follow the Victorian laws with your own national caveats on a few things. Victoria also has a much broader definition of hazards and more regulations around the hierarchy of controls. So the hierarchy of controls is, in regulatory jargon, basically you have your risk, you assess it, and then you put things in place, controls, to reduce, minimise or mitigate it. Victorian law stated very clearly that training is not a primary control, because the focus should be on work design and how you are designing the work that your people are doing. So training is part of it, but is not a primary control. So for example, you can't give somebody resilience training if they feel they're overworked. So, which is good, very good actually. But yeah, there's just some of the key differences. So you want to go to the next slide. Where are we? And then I'm just going to, okay. So this is just a very small and quick example. I'm only going to touch on this lightly due to time. So this will be included in the, I'll make sure it goes into the one pager, which is now probably going to be a two pager, let's be honest. So the psychosocial hazards. Every psychosocial hazards you identify, you must design the controls. So we've used two neuroinclusive examples here, which impact a lot of people, but will impact neurodiverse people more. So we have, bear with me 1 second. So low job control. So basically excessive supervision, no choice about work and where you do it, no opportunity to improve workflows if you see that there is, you could make them faster or better. Micromanagement, frequent unannounced changes. So basically you don't feel in control about the work you're doing, and every day you're not sure what to expect. So the control for that one is redesign work to include more flexible scheduling, match autonomy to strengths, etc. So it's a clear example of basically the hazard and then what you can do about it. And there's plenty more examples, not neuroinclusive ones, but plenty more examples on the WorkSafe site. Sam, do you want to go? I'm going to leave that one for a second. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay. This is a really important one because talking to people and like with work health and safety, it's like, who's responsible? Well, the employer, owner of the company, directors, etc., are the ones that legally are responsible and the ones that will kind of get into trouble. But every single, and this is something I think each company should look into for their own areas, every single person listed there has a role to play in psychological safety. For example, this is a neurodivergent employee who's been, who has low job control, has been bullied by a couple of colleagues, regularly faces microaggressions about the way she dresses, her tone of voice, etc. So while legally there might not be repercussions for the employees who are bullying her, there will be internal repercussions because, if a company is going to get into trouble for that kind of behavior, then they must follow through with their employees and stuff. So everybody on that list will be impacted in some way if they do not help manage the psychosocial hazards impacting this employer. And now I think we should, okay, quickly, just next slide. Okay. So, okay, I'll let you back in if you can rejoin, Michelle. So the key thing about, okay, so why it matters, before I hand over to Samantha, very quickly, why it matters. Reducing your psychosocial hazards increases the inclusion of employees, as I've mentioned. So the same changes that protect mental health also allow neurodivergent employees to thrive. Now, neurodivergent employees have a lot of amazing strengths, just like everybody in your workforce. So inclusion helps all of your employees thrive. It boosts engagement, performance, retention, and then you're lowering your legal and reputational risk and avoiding having fights as well. So there's another whole conversation we can have about the fact that have we turned psychological safety, well-being and engagement into a compliance tick box? But that's not for today. So Sam, Samantha, I'm just going to skip through the next slide and just go straight to your stuff in 12. Samantha wants to, is going to show how all of this looks when applied to some parts of the end-to-end employee life cycle through a HR lens, just to provide a bit more context in that area and to show the range of things that can be done. So you're on mute.
I'll start with typing in response to Jackie. So just so you know, Jackie's asked a really interesting question, one that I am absolutely conscious of.
Okay.
And I think it is, I think it's a big issue with inclusion at the moment globally. So it's kind of what we would call like the pushback against inclusion.
Yes.
So Jackie's question is essentially, do we think this legislation is going to create more of a pushback against neurodivergent hiring? And I think, yeah, Jackie, I think it is a risk that we are going to have to manage that in and of itself. I think that bad players are certainly going to potentially see this as another reason, because they already would be excluding us anyway. But bad players are potentially going to see this as a reason not to hire neurodivergent people or people with disability. So absolutely, that is a risk. And I guess though that the challenge is that in and of itself, it's kind of like a separate issue in my head. You know, the argument for the inclusion of neurodivergent people in terms of the benefit to organisations is huge. And I think many of those bad players that make those kind of decisions don't understand the value that neurodivergence plays in the workplace. And so that is obviously a huge piece of education that we need to do. And we probably also need to strengthen up disability discrimination overall. So yeah, it's a great question. Sorry.
And we will talk for ages in this one too. But just very quickly, 70% of neurodivergent people do not disclose at work. So there is that element on top of it, but I will pull together Sam's notes and some of my thoughts because it's a really good one, and there is different views. So anyway, Samantha, you best keep going.
I think it's a very valid question. It's certainly a huge risk, but I also think that it kind of testament to the fact that we need to tighten up the disability discrimination laws. I think that is potentially some of that is happening with the changes in Australia to the Disability Discrimination Act that are happening right now. I know the consultations happened on that, and the new kind of changes will be coming out. So yeah, let's hope that tightens things up a little bit. But also we need to be really clear about the messaging to organisations about the benefits, the huge uplift in productivity, in shareholder value, in innovation, and all of those things of having people that think differently. So essentially, when Amanda asked me to get involved in the workshop, I kind of put my hat on and thought, how can I add value and kind of think about how this applies across the employee life cycle. So often when I'm working with organisations, particularly if I'm working with the HR team, we're thinking about neuroinclusion across the employee life cycle. And so I kind of just did a bit of a think about how I see this kind of playing out as an opportunity or as a risk for organisations. In the different stages. And I thought about what the commonalities were of opportunities and commonalities of risks across those different life cycle stages. So I guess, across the board, right from attraction, when we first start engaging with people and trying to get them interested in working for us, right through to the offboarding piece when people leave us, one of the biggest things that we can do in order to ensure psychosocial safety with that neuroinclusive lens is anticipate. So we can anticipate that 20% of the population, 20% of the people that work for us are going to be neurodivergent. Whether we know it or not, whether they know it or not, that is the statistics, that is the prevalence in the community. And so we need to anticipate this. We need to expect that we should be planning for those people. And under this new legislation, we need to be expecting and planning to protect their mental health as they engage with us. A huge part of what we need to be doing across the employee life cycle is what we call inclusive consultative design. So essentially finding out from the people that work for us what is going to make work safe at all of those different stages and what we need to incorporate into our processes and our procedures on that basis. So an example of that, and we're going to talk through some examples in a minute, but an example of that might be consulting with the people that work with us about our competencies and how inclusive those competencies are of all of the different kinds of thinking. Me and Amanda were having a bit of a joke about this yesterday, about how, as an example, if our competency of communication included must make excellent eye contact, that is discriminatory against people who don't make eye contact necessarily as a form of communicating that they're listening. And so there can be some really kind of non-inclusive language in all sorts of different pieces of our HR collateral or our ways of kind of thinking. And so by consulting with our people and really considering the needs of everybody, we're going to make those things more inclusive right from the beginning. If we want to protect people's psychological well-being, we definitely need to be signalling safety from right from the beginning that we start speaking to people. So when we say signaling safety, what we're meaning is we're wanting to make people feel like it is a safe place here to share information about the way that you think and to ask for things to be done differently in order to be productive and in order to feel psychologically safe at work. And one of the biggest ways in which we need to do this is ensure that our leadership team, right from the top, understand the importance of these things, have bought into the changes that are going on and what needs to be done, and they're able to signal out to everybody that they have expectations around people's behaviour. Because that means that everybody knows how they're supposed to behave and what they're supposed to do. When we have this anticipatory mindset, then and we know, as an example, that 20% of the people working for us are going to think differently to the norm, to what we might call neurotypical thinking. Then we can anticipate that with this range of different thinking, all contributing to our problem solving and our innovation, that different thinkers probably have what we might call different productivity needs. So what do I mean by that? So as an example, as somebody who is ADHD and dyscalculic, I tend to do my best work in a hyper-focused state. So essentially, I tend to produce a high volume of good quality work in hyper-focus. So if I'm working on a big report, as an example, when I worked for Australian Disability Network, I was producing reports that were, 50, 60, 70 pages long, huge reports. And I needed to do that in a hyper-focused state. That's not the kind of work that I can do, getting constantly interrupted, an hour here, half an hour there. I need to just lock myself in a room and do it. That enables me to be my most productive and do my most amazing work. And that might be different to other people, but essentially I need to be in a work environment that enables me to work like that and to work safely for me. And if we're planning for neurodivergent people, we need to plan and expect people to have different productivity needs and have the flexibility in place to accommodate those. We want to create business as usual. So that's what the BAU stands for, in case that's an acronym too far. We want to create business as usual conversations around collaboration and what we call co-creation of ways of working. So me and Amanda were talking about this yesterday. It's very simple. It's things like, saying, hey, we're going to work on this project together. My best way of communicating is in written format. So at the end of the meetings that we have, if we could just find a way to make sure we've got some written takeaways. We might say, well, no one really wants to be typing up the notes, so let's do an AI transcription of our meeting. Problem solved. That will give us all our to-dos in written format, and we don't need to worry about it anymore. So if we're in the right kind of work environment, that solves a lot of problems without needing to put formal workplace adjustments in place, because just by encouraging that BAU mentality of co-creation and collaboration, we're creating psychological safety without the need for adjustments. However, sometimes...
Sorry, Samantha. We've only got about 3 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
No
worries. So I'll finish this bit, but essentially, everything I'm saying, the opposite of which would be true, I guess. If the risks were involved, essentially. So when we're thinking about adjustments, making sure when we say proactive adjustments, what we're saying with that is making sure that everybody's getting asked about adjustments and that it's a standard practice. It's not something that we're doing as and when we see someone with a disability. Everybody's getting asked what adjustments they need in the workplace as standard, and those are getting put in place as a result of the processes that we have. And then finally, again, me and Amanda spoke about this yesterday. I think it is easy to underestimate the risk of compounding distress when we do not consider how to be empathetic. So I shared with Amanda an example of when I shared information about a disability with a previous workplace and asked for adjustments. And I was met with, we don't believe you, that is things that are hard for you. You need to prove that. When I asked for adjustments, the messaging was, we kind of feel like you're asking for things to be easier than everybody else. And when you have gone through the process of late diagnosis and the trauma sometimes that creates, to be then met with re-traumatization at work when you ask for help is really, really damaging. And I work with lots of clients who go through the same kind of thing as well. Now, very quickly, what I've popped on here, and happy to kind of share this information as well, but I've popped on here is just some examples of how we can think about signaling, how we can think about psychological safety in different pieces of the process within the employee life cycle. And it really, each example kind of speaks to that proactive attitude of anticipating, planning, consulting, and making things business as usual. So happy to kind of talk these things through in the questions, but essentially, by doing those things, we're able to ensure that everybody feels safe. I guess of these two examples here, I'll just pick up really quickly on people often think about recruitment, they often think about onboarding, they often forget the internal promotions and kind of performance management processes when they're thinking about inclusion. So that's why I wanted to include that here. And again, me and Amanda were kind of sharing this example. I've worked with a number of people who've been, a lot of the people I work with are quite senior, who've been through management training processes, and the 360 feedback process. Oh, it's the devil's work as far as I'm concerned, because essentially what that often just becomes is a finger pointing exercise where people are just saying, I don't like the fact that you're neurodivergent. I don't like the fact that you're autistic. And that is what the feedback that people are getting, and it's extremely damaging. So I think it's an example of a piece of the process that really needs consideration if we want to create safety for people. So yeah, happy to talk through any of these things. Hopefully, I know that's very short and sweet, but yeah, hopefully that gives us a bit of an idea. You're on mute now.
Okay, so two ADHD people trying to stay to time. Sorry, that's all I can say. We got a bit excited and probably talked a bit too much on certain points, but we have a whole bunch of fantastic questions in the chat. We will respond to every single one of them, and we will share them with the group, as well as the one pager with definitions, etc., that we spoke about, and the links to key resources. So if you have to jump off, completely understand. If you do want to stay on and ask some questions, please do. Samantha, myself, or definitely myself, are not running anywhere very quickly. So, but thank you for staying around long enough for the main part of the presentation. And we hope we shared a lot of information with you that's of value. So if you are staying around, there are
There's some great questions. There's some great questions in the chat.